told the world these stories were separate. They told you one was old Hollywood gossip and the other was an isolated billionaire scandal. But what if that was the lie from the beginning? What if the same machine that chewed through vulnerable child stars in the shadows of Los Angeles is the very same machine that later exploded into headlines through Jeffrey Epstein? And now, two men from completely different worlds are pointing at the same monster.
There was a ring of at least 6 people who all had various positions within the entertainment industry. Well, he was the guy who ran Alfie's Soda Pop Club. And I met him when I was 12 years old.
A lot of the agents I worked with over the time had mentioned and talked about and how really bad this actually is.
For years, Corey Feldman was dismissed as damaged, unstable, dramatic, the classic script. Take the witness, stain the witness, erase the witness. But look closer. He was not some outsider throwing random accusations. He was inside the system as a child. He lived in the center of it while cameras rolled and adults smiled. He saw what happened when fame became bait and power became a weapon. Then on the other side stands Jim Caviezel, a man whose mainstream career shifted the moment he began speaking about global exploitation networks and the hidden protection around them. Two men, different careers, different generations, same warning. That is where people should have started paying attention. Feldman says the sickness in Hollywood was never a rumor. It was structure. It was organized. It was normalized. Children entered an industry built on dreams, but behind the casting doors, another game was being played. Who gets the role? Who gets the meeting? Who gets frozen out? Adults controlled everything, and some of them allegedly used that power in ways too dark for polite interviews. The public saw red carpets. The insiders saw predators with business cards.
I became aware of the dangers that go on with children around the world and through that process.
And then comes the chilling part. Caviezel describes the top of the pyramid, not the local handler, not the neighborhood fixer, the elite layer, the protected layer, the people who never look nervous because they believe consequences are for ordinary people. Suddenly, Feldman's ground-level story and Caviezel's global-level story begin to mirror each other. One describes roots, one describes branches, same tree, same poison.
We have the ability to let our voices be heard and break the dam of silence.
This is why the names matter so much, not because gossip loves names, but because systems hide behind anonymity. Feldman did something dangerous. He named people. He described managers, handlers, connected figures, people who allegedly moved freely through child entertainment spaces while everyone looked away. That changes everything. Because once names appear, silence becomes suspicious. If everybody knew, then who said nothing? Who kept cashing checks? Who kept inviting them to parties? Who kept pretending they had no idea? Then the Epstein scandal detonated in public view, and suddenly the world acted shocked that wealth and influence could protect misconduct. Shocked? Really? Feldman had been saying for decades that power shields monsters. The only difference was scale. In Hollywood, it may have happened through agents, casting influence, exclusive teen spaces, private introductions. In the Epstein world, it allegedly happened through jets, islands, mansions, black books, access lists. Same logic, different wallpaper.
Good people sit back and do nothing and allow this evil to occur. There's got to be people that stand up in the time that it occurs.
And that is the sentence nobody wants to say out loud. These may not be two separate tragedies. They may be one operating model repeated at different levels. Find vulnerable people. Use status as camouflage. Use fear as glue. Use shame as a lock. Use connections as armor. Then call anyone who speaks out crazy. It's an old playbook because it works frighteningly well.
Epstein Island isn't the only island out there. And Tim Ballard takes down one in the film.
They were always talking during this one part, the audience. And I thought, maybe there's something wrong. I'd never seen that before. And about 1,500 people at the end, I spoke to them. And I asked them, what that was. And they all yelled out, Epstein Island. And then I said, oh, okay, now I understand.
To understand how deep this goes, go back to the 1980s. Feldman was one of the biggest child stars alive. Smiling face, hit movies, fame everywhere. But behind the applause, he says he and Corey Haim were surrounded by powerful men who controlled access and exploited trust. Think about that contradiction. America watched kids become stars while those kids allegedly navigated adults who knew exactly how helpless children can be. That contradiction should haunt the industry forever. He described a culture where people knew, executives knew, agents knew, other actors knew. Maybe not every detail, maybe not every act, but enough to know something was wrong. Yet the machine kept moving. Why? Because money hates disruption, fame hates scandal, and truth threatens everyone who profited by staying comfortable. Then comes the betrayal that hits hardest. Caretakers, managers, mentors, adults presented as protectors. Feldman's claims were not about strangers jumping from alleyways. They were about trusted figures placed close to young talent. That's what makes these stories so disturbing. Danger did not always arrive looking dangerous. Sometimes it arrived smiling, credentialed, recommended, approved by the very system parents trusted. And every time Feldman spoke louder, resistance seemed to grow louder too. Lawsuit fears, smear campaigns, questions about his credibility instead of questions about the accused. Notice the pattern. When institutions fear exposure, they often attack the messenger first because investigating the message could lead somewhere terrifying. Caviezel's side of the warning pushes that fear even higher. If blackmail, elite protection, and reputational shields truly intersected around figures like Epstein, then some of the most powerful circles on Earth had reasons to keep doors closed. That means whistleblowers were not only fighting bad individuals, they were fighting incentives. And incentives are often more ruthless than any single person. So now the public is left with an ugly question. Were these warnings ignored because they sounded unbelievable, or because too many people knew they were believable? That question changes the mood in every room. It changes every old interview, every awkward laugh, every sudden silence, every celebrity friendship photo that now looks different in hindsight. Feldman kept talking. Caviezel kept talking. One from the wreckage of childhood fame, one from the fallout of confronting global darkness. And maybe that is what scares the machine most. Witnesses from different worlds telling a story that rhymes. Because when separate voices echo the same pattern, denial starts to crack. And this is where the story becomes even darker, because exposing a machine is one thing, surviving after you expose it is another. The public often imagines whistleblowers walk into the light and receive applause. But history shows something colder. They are mocked, isolated, financially drained, called unstable, called bitter, called attention seekers. The truth does not always get welcomed. Sometimes it gets hunted. Corey Feldman has repeatedly claimed that every time he tried to reveal more, pressure followed. Legal threats, character attacks, public ridicule. Ask yourself why that pattern appears so often whenever powerful circles are named. If the claims were meaningless, why react so aggressively? Why spend so much energy crushing the speaker? Feldman said he wanted to give authorities names years ago. He said he tried to tell people what was happening when he was younger, but the focus went elsewhere. That detail should stop people cold. Imagine carrying trauma, stepping forward, and watching institutions chase a bigger headline instead of the uglier truth right in front of them. It creates the perfect environment for predators, confusion above, silence below, and children trapped in the middle. That is how systems survive decade after decade. Not because they are unbeatable, but because attention is constantly redirected. Then there is Corey Haim, whose life became a symbol of what prolonged damage can look like. Fame at a young age, visible struggle, years of pain, public spectacle, and endless speculation. Whether people agree on every detail or not, one fact remains brutal. The industry celebrated him when he was profitable and seemed far less interested when he was hurting. That contrast tells its own story. Hollywood loves stars. It has a much harder time loving wounded human beings. And while Feldman described the lower corridors of the entertainment machine, Caviezel pointed towards something broader, the architecture of protection itself. He used the image of an octopus, a creature with many arms. Cut one arm off and another moves. That metaphor matters because it suggests these scandals are not isolated personalities but networks of convenience. Finance protects media. Media protects image. Image protects access. Access protects abuse. Then when one branch gets exposed, another branch calmly keeps operating. It is less dramatic than movies and far more dangerous because it feels ordinary. The Epstein scandal made ordinary people confront something they long suspected but rarely said aloud. Status can function like invisibility. People asked how someone so notorious could remain so connected, but maybe the better question is how many people benefited from not asking questions. Privacy private meetings, famous guests, social introductions, public photos. Respectability is often built by association, and once enough famous faces gather around one person, doubt itself starts feeling socially inconvenient. That is how camouflage works in elite spaces. This is why the so-called gatekeepers become such an important part of the puzzle, not necessarily because every person in those circles is guilty of crimes, but because influence can sanitize danger. A glowing introduction on television, a smiling appearance at a gala, a trusted celebrity embracing the wrong person in public. Suddenly, suspicion softens. The crowd thinks, if they trust him, why shouldn't I? That emotional shortcut may be one of the most valuable currencies in the world. Feldman understood something many survivors understand too well. Truth alone is not enough. You also need money, lawyers, security, stamina, and the ability to withstand years of mockery. That is a brutal requirement. It means the burden of proof often falls heaviest on the person already harmed. Meanwhile, the well-connected can delay, deny, distract, and wait for headlines to move on. Time itself becomes a weapon. And then came the era of documentaries, leaked files, reopened questions, internet investigators, and audiences less willing to accept polished smiles as proof of innocence. The old strategy of ignore it until it dies stopped working so easily. People began connecting patterns across industries, music, film, politics, business, different names, similar methods, young targets, controlled environments, reputation shields, sudden disappearances from headlines, carefully worded denials. It all started to feel less random. Still, the machine adapts. It always does. It turns scandal into spectacle. It lets the public obsess over one villain while broader structures remain untouched. One arrest becomes the story while dozens of enablers fade into mist. One shocking headline satisfies outrage while no one asks who opened doors, who supplied introductions, who stayed silent, who benefited, who cleaned up afterward. That selective outrage is another form of protection. So when Feldman and Caviezel appear to be warning about the same underlying force from two different directions, it unsettles people for a reason. One says, I saw what happened to children inside Hollywood. The other says, I saw the scale of exploitation beyond Hollywood. Put those statements together and the comfortable walls between scandals begin to collapse. Maybe the categories were always artificial. Maybe celebrity scandal, trafficking scandal, institutional scandal, and media scandal are not separate rooms at all. Maybe they are hallways in the same building. And what happens if that building truly exists? Then some careers were built inside it. Some fortunes were protected by it. Some reputations were polished by it. Some people were destroyed by it. Some children never recovered from it. That possibility is why these stories carry such emotional force. Because beneath every headline and every famous name is a simpler truth. Vulnerable people were hurt while powerful people stayed comfortable. Now the public stands in a strange moment. More information exists than ever before, yet certainty still feels slippery. Files emerge, claims clash, denials continue, audiences argue. But confusion should not erase patterns. When too many stories share the same anatomy, wise people stop calling it coincidence. They start asking who designed the pattern in the first place. And maybe that is why this story refuses to die. Because it is no longer just about one island, one actor, one producer, one victim, or one decade. It is about the terrifying possibility that an entire culture learned how to package power as glamour while hiding rot underneath. Feldman kept talking. Caviezel kept talking. Others will keep talking. The names may change, the faces may age, the headlines may fade, but if the structure remains, then this story is not over at all. It may only be entering the chapter people can no longer pretend not to see.